What's going on, everyone? Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Ducks Dish podcast. I'm your host, Max Torres, publisher and lead editor of Ducks Digest, covering the Oregon Ducks for Sports Illustrated over on Fan Nation. You know how we do out here. We are hitting on Oregon football recruiting all the time. But in this latest episode, coming at you live from Eugene, Wednesday, April 13th, we are going to be hitting on some of the recent updates that we've gotten out of Oregon spring football practice. The Ducks wrapped up their 9th of 15 spring practices on Tuesday. And joining me to break it all down here on the Ducks Dish podcast is Dylan Reubenking, a.k.a. Rube. He's a reporter for us at Ducks Digest, and we are so glad to have him. How we doing, man?
I'm doing great. I'm feeling a little bit nostalgic because I just celebrated a year with Ducks Digest last week, and I got started right around this time, kind of right in the middle of spring, and kind of doing the same stuff that I did when I started. Obviously, the podcast is a cool element of it that I wasn't doing before, but like just hopping into the live, the pressers and stuff, and then writing stories about that. It's just kind of give me that cool feeling again.
What a great note to start things on. A happy 1-year anniversary to you, man. Super grateful to have you here on Ducks Digest. It's been great working with you. And I mean, if you guys could only, know how many texts I've sent to Dylan at just like the 11th hour asking him to like write a story or do something for me. The dude's just an absolute rock star. So definitely have to give you some props for that, man. And it's just been great to see how you've grown. And you've, taught me a whole lot about just the whole digital media space and football and certainly hoops. I think you're much more well-versed on hoops than I am, but it's great to have you here, man.
Appreciate the kind words. I'm super excited to still be here and heading to Eugene next week for the spring game and some practices. It's been so long since I've been in Eugene. It's October. That was the Cal game, so it has been a long time. Super excited to get back.
Well, that's going to be a fun time, no doubt about it. But in the meantime, let's get into some new updates that we have out of spring practice. The first of which is the latest injury update on Oregon cornerback Dante Manning. If you guys didn't catch this story over on Ducks Digest, we've been covering this one since the genesis of it, if you will. On Saturday, when Dante Manning got wheeled out of practice on a wheelchair, when the Ducks were holding their first spring scrimmage. And then after we had the press conferences, we later saw him walking past the media in a pretty heavy leg brace. So that certainly was an encouraging sign. But we did get an update from Dan Lanning when we talked to him on Tuesday. As you would expect, coaches usually like to hold the injury updates pretty close to the vest. But here's the quote that we have from Lanning. Right now, he has an injury, going through recovery. We don't think it'll be a long-term deal. So, Dylan, I think that's certainly some positive news on the injury front regarding Manning. Seems like it's still a little too early to tell too much about it. On Saturday, we didn't get a lot of specifics from Lanning because he had just wrapped up practice, so you wouldn't expect a lot of information to be readily available. But it sounds like it's at least a little bit encouraging when you hear the words not long-term.
Yeah, and the wheelchair, like hearing that part kind of freaked me out a little bit. I think a lot of Ducks fans are a little worried about that, but the fact that he wasn't on crutches coming out was a really good sign, just because, with those lower leg ankle injuries, I'm not, trying to speculate what exactly it was, but, foot, ankle in that area, that sort of injury, it can be really tough to walk on that with such a heavy brace. So the fact that he's walking on it, and then you said Tuesday he was out there stretching and doing some light warm-ups. That's a really good sign. So, of course, we're not going to know a whole lot about his injury. I feel like people are trying to test Dan Lanning, seeing what he's going to reveal when it comes to injury stuff. Thankfully, there's not a whole lot to ask about, this time compared to last year. But, it sounds like it's progressing really well. I like that he's walking, obviously. But yeah, the not long-term thing, that's a really good sign. That's probably the best news out of what we've heard so far.
And we still don't have specific details as far as if it is, a foot or ankle or higher on the leg. I mean, if you think about the term leg injury, it's pretty all encompassing. So maybe it's something like a knee. I don't want to speculate too much. Hopefully we'll get those details and be able to share that with you, as we work through spring ball right now. But from what I saw at practice on Tuesday, he was out there with the team. And he was going through some of the warm-ups and putting weight on it and walking. It's not like he was going through drills and doing cartwheels and all that jazz, but it did look like he was moving on it fairly well, especially after what we saw when he first got injured. As far as, when you see a wheelchair, you think it's something a little bit more significant than that. But as far as the rest of the summer, the rest of the spring rather, just based on the brace that I saw, just to speculate and just kind of give my 2 cents, I don't think I would expect to see him in the spring game just after seeing that. And I think, I'm not sure how significant I would say it is because it is still so early in the spring. But with how young that room is, you really want to minimize, in my opinion, how much time he's missing. I'm not saying rush him back, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, for something like a spring game, obviously it'll help the coaches. It'll help the young guys out there, keep getting those 11 on 11 reps, those live game reps as best as you can in April. But at the same time, you don't want to risk it if he's already got, if he's dinged up, you don't want to risk re-injuring him in a game that ultimately doesn't matter, win or loss. So I really think it's probably for the best if they hold him, even if he's progressing. I still think it's probably for the best, just because, being in that heavy boot, I don't feel like they're going to, you're going to see a real quick turnaround in the next 10 days. You never know. I could be completely wrong. Maybe that's a completely precautionary thing. The size of the brace is just for protection, and maybe he heals quickly, and hopefully he does. But I'm almost excited. It is kind of scary, but I am excited at the same time to see the guys behind him in the cornerback room, just because we haven't seen a lot of them. Like Avante Dickerson, Darren Barkins are two really talented guys. Then you got Jalil Florence. This is a really Christian Gonzalez. Haven't seen in an Oregon uniform yet. So yeah, really new cornerback room, and there was a lot to learn about it.
Darren Barkins was the guy that stepped in during Manning's absence, and the portion of practice that we saw, at least running with kind of that first group of defenders. We can't really call it a first team right now, and Dan Lanning's been pretty adamant about that. We don't have like an official depth chart. We kind of just have the green team and yellow team. So yeah, those guys that you mentioned, Avante Dickerson and Jalil Florence, continue to get it work, and that's been the approach of a lot of these defensive backs throughout the spring. Is just working out a variety of positions and getting those reps, because like you said, a lot of those guys haven't. So we'll see how that brace is looking, and any other updates we can possibly share when the Ducks return to the practice field on Thursday, and keep you guys updated on the latest there on the injury front. But we also got one more other semi-significant piece of injury news, and that is the latest injury update on linebacker Justin Flo. A guy who a lot of people are hoping will be kind of one of the faces of this Oregon defense. He most recently played in the Fresno State game and just had an absolutely monster performance. I think it was 14 tackles and a forced fumble. He was all over the field, but he's been limited all throughout spring, and he wasn't wearing pads in the last practice that we had, and he was still in trainers from what we saw. But we were asking Dan Lanning about the latest update there, and if it looks like he might be able to play in the spring game, because all eyes, Dylan, are obviously on that game next Saturday, and this is what Lanning had to say. Trending back, probably too early to say one way or the other if we'll see him out there for the spring game, but he's trending back. We're getting him in a little bit of drill work each day. So still positive news on the injury front, but perhaps maybe even a little bit more encouraging than Manning, considering the recency of the two injuries.
Yeah, Flo's been out there since the start of spring, like you said, with limitations. It's been 9 months, I believe, since that injury before the Ohio State game. Foot injury, pretty serious one. So I like that he's out there and he's practicing, getting some drill work in. And again, you don't want to rush that again, because he's got, multiple serious injuries that he's had in the last 2 years. Has only been able to play in front of Oregon fans, whether on TV or in person, 3 times. You think about the Stanford game his freshman year, then the spring game and the Fresno State game last year. And that's all we've really seen of him. So again, it would be awesome to see him out there, just because you're not going to find many more talented linebackers, not just on this team, not just in this conference, but in the country. than Justin Flo. So if you can get back healthy, I think that brings a different level of energy and excitement to the Oregon defense for sure.
Another guy that you really don't want to rush, perhaps even more so than Dante Manning, because we've seen the breakout potential with Justin Flo. And Oregon fans want to see him next to Noah Sewell so bad. And I'm right there with them. In the time since Flo has been limited in spring practice, we've seen Jeffrey Bassa get a lot of work. That's another dude who I'm super intrigued about, because there was a little bit of question as far as what his role would be moving forward after coming in as a safety, and then the Ducks were depleted at linebacker. So he really kind of just slid into that role and made it his own. And it sounds like, just based on how Dan Lanning likes to run his defenses, that he's just the kind of guy that he's looking for at linebacker, with that combination of speed and physicality. So we'll see if Flo can be in the spring game. Personally, kind of the similar case with Manning. I don't think we're going to see him necessarily, but with the depth that the Ducks have, particularly at the linebacker spot, not something that you'd be super worried about. Guys like Jackson LeDuc also getting some significant reps. He came back last season. He revealed to us in spring that he was battling COVID, and he also was recovering from an injury, so he kind of had everything coming at him at once. Keith Brown, another guy that got some really significant reps last year. So with Justin Flo, you hope to see him back as soon as you can, but that's a guy you definitely want to be patient with. And unlike in the secondary, at least in my opinion, as it stands right now, I think you have the depth to be more cautious in your approach. Not to say that they're not going to be with Manning, but obviously the linebackers are much more stacked than the secondary right now.
Absolutely. And then you have the potential of Harrison Taggart and Devin Jackson behind him as well, even after Keith Brown and Jackson LeDuc. But I'm really excited to see Keith Brown and Jackson LeDuc take another step, because they were even limited last year as well. Really, that entire linebacker group outside of Sewell and Bossa were really banged up last year. So those are a couple guys I'm really excited to see too. The spring game is just going to be really exciting to see. What could have been last year, even just with all the guys that were injured, especially on defense, flying around out there, and just being a part of this Dan Lanning, Tosh Lupoi mishmash of defensive firepower. Like there's so much to glean from what we've heard so far about the defense and what it could look like. And there's so many guys that the previous staff recruited that are going to fit right in, and maybe even better than the previous staff.
We'll keep you guys posted on all the latest updates around Justin Flo and other injury news over on Ducks Digest. And we will talk about more headlines from Oregon spring football practice right after the ad break. Stick around. Welcome back to the Ducks Dish podcast. We're rocking and rolling on a cold and rainy Eugene Wednesday. I might add that it has been raining, it has been hailing, and it was also sunny at various parts of the day. But Dylan, we're going to dig into the biggest storyline, I would argue, in all of spring camp for Oregon, and that is the quarterback battle. People are hoping to get any little tidbits of information that they can on Oregon's 3 scholarship quarterbacks that are in the mix here. So we're going to update them on the latest that we're hearing out of spring football. And before we get into what we're seeing, Dylan, kind of just wanted to get your thoughts on maybe a little bit of a superlative. Just how important do you think this quarterback battle is for Oregon as we stand here in spring?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like once you have your quarterback situation figured out, I feel like the rest of the offense can really revolve around that. It feels like the last 2 years you've known who the quarterback is, but you know that it could have been a little bit better in terms of the production and just the electricity of the offense. And it feels like once you have your guy at quarterback, the run game will rally around, and the offensive line will do its job. Obviously, it's not going to be decided at the end of spring. The quarterback battle is probably going to go up until fall camp, maybe right even before the Georgia game, I would imagine. So it's going to be exciting. And the one thing that we've heard is that it really is an open competition, and it's not just Bo Nix and Ty Thompson. I can't tell you how many times on Instagram I see polls where it's like, who should win? And it's just those two. Jay Butterfield's in there too. Don't forget about him. So 3-way battle, really, really excited to see who comes through.
Yeah, the quarterback position has been so integral for any team, but I think specifically in Oregon's case, because you've had some really high level players come through the program. I can point to Marcus Mariota and Vernon Adams, even though he was only here for a year. A lot of people want to speculate if he didn't get injured, just how far could Oregon have gone into the postseason, especially after that crazy game against Michigan State. And then Justin Herbert obviously had a tremendous amount of success here, but he was even kind of handcuffed offensively just because of the play calling that we saw from Marcus Arroyo and just the system that was in place. But the past 2 years have left a lot to be desired at quarterback. And with the talent that the Ducks have accrued on the recruiting trail, particularly at the skill position, and definitely the offensive line as well, it really just feels like that's the last position that you're waiting for this offense to hit on. And I know that guys like Dante Thornton and Troy Franklin and Chris Hudson, Chase Cota, they're super excited to be catching passes here in the spring. And Kenny Dillingham's vision for the offense is very, I would say, enticing, exciting for anyone that's catching a ball or getting the handoff in this offense. So just to break down the latest that we're hearing on this quarterback battle, we got to see kind of our first dose of 11 on 11 not too long ago. That was something that I haven't gotten to see since I got to Eugene in July of 2020. There was a lot of stuff with COVID that obviously made it hard to go to practices since there were health protocols in place. But that was when I saw the 11 on 11 periods, I felt like I was in heaven. I was like, this is the coolest thing I've probably seen, being this close to the game, because on game days, we're all the way up in the press box. So it's still sick, but you're not that close. So a lot of people were kind of surprised when they saw, and after that day of 11 on 11, that Ty took the first reps, and then Bo followed him, and then Jay, I think is what it was on that first day. So naturally, a lot of people were saying, "Oh, Ty Thompson took reps over Bo Nix, the first team reps and spring practice." But there was kind of a mixed bag of results, if you will, because I remember there was a touchdown pass to Sean Dollars, but then there was also a pass from Ty that got intercepted. So this is still very, very early on in this competition, and I think that people who aren't actually in the Oregon media, not to toot my own horn, but it tends to get blown out of proportion, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like that story specifically that you said about Ty getting those first reps on that first day was everywhere. And yeah, it's from what we've heard from Dan Lanning, they're really just rotating guys. There's no sort of this is the first team, this is the second team, the third team. Like they haven't figured really any of that stuff out yet. There's no organizational chart like the last one did, the last coaching staff did rather. So they're really just putting guys out there and getting guys comfortable with each other. Obviously, once we get closer to the end of spring game or spring camp and closer to the spring game, you'll probably start seeing some more continuity there, as we've heard from a couple position groups. But yeah, I mean, I don't think you're really gonna, there's not a lot of substance to one guy getting reps over the other guy to start really any of the days, just because they're just trying to get everybody the same amount of reps. So I think it's good. It's better that way. They're not just handing the keys to a guy and giving him day one reps, to start each day of practice. Everybody deserves the same shot, and they're definitely going forward with that mindset.
Just because we don't have a ton of stuff to go off of in the 11 on 11 periods, as far as we can't make too much of who gets the first team reps per se. I think what I'm looking for, Dylan, is the highlights. What sticks out when we do get to see these guys. Who looks composed in the pocket, who's maybe a little bit rattled, who's rushing through things. And I think just from the most recent thing that practice that we saw, just to kind of reset things a little bit, the most recent practice on Tuesday that we saw, it was a fastball period. That's what the 11 on 11 is called at these practices. Dan Lanning will grab the mic and then he'll say fastball, fastball, and then you can hear it ringing throughout usually the outdoor practice facility, but since it's been rainy this week, we've been inside the Mashofsky Center. So the most recent order was Bo Nix, Jay Butterfield, and Ty Thompson. So again, to glean what we can from the order, I think it's indicative of Jay Butterfield potentially having a real shot at this quarterback job, to see that he gets those second team reps, because I say that because the third group that has tended to mainly consist of walk-ons and maybe some reserve guys that we're not as familiar with. But in the most recent batch that we saw, one of the highlights that I recall was it was kind of a nice back shoulder pass from Bo Nix to Byron Cardwell. And that was exciting to see, especially because I want to see more from Byron Cardwell catching the ball out of the backfield, not because he isn't capable of it, but just because when we did see him, he was mainly running the ball last year. So, that's kind of what I have to share as far as what we've seen on the practice field. I definitely want to pay more attention to those guys tomorrow. But fun to get a little bit of a glimpse into the Oregon offense that we haven't gotten in the past, and some highlights here and there.
Yeah, I think the highlights are going to be, the thing I'm excited to hear about. It seems like every day that we've talked to Dan Lanning, it sounds like you hear the word, they made explosive plays on offense. I don't think there's been a day that y'all have talked to Dan Lanning where he hasn't said that. And obviously he'll follow it up by saying there's certainly room for improvement and all that kind of stuff, trying to keep the playing field level there. But I really think that it's kind of the opposite where we're at now with Oregon's personnel on offense in terms of the quarterback versus the receivers. Because when there was Mariota and Herbert, obviously legendary quarterbacks with the program, but the receiving core wasn't stacked with these, 4-star, 5-star guys who were NFL caliber, really. You had a couple guys here and there, but now you have quarterbacks that can really lead this program, that are really capable of, taking over this offense. And now you're also complement them with extremely talented guys at receiver, not just at the very top, but, throughout the entire depth chart. And then you add guys like Chase Cota, the running backs. It sounds like they're really getting better at catching out of the backfield. And then you have the tight ends too, who are all insanely talented and are going to be more involved in the passing game as well. So it feels like, in terms of the offensive personnel and the potential, it feels like this could be as complete of an offense head to toe as we've seen in a long time.
And it's interesting that you say that, because there was so much attrition and so many departures from last year's squad. Just to get people up to speed, Micah Pittman obviously hit the portal, and then Johnny Johnson goes to the NFL draft. Jalen Redd exhausts his eligibility, and then Devin Williams also goes to the NFL draft. So this is still a really young wide receiver core, but it does have that talent that I think we haven't really seen in a while at Oregon, and they're hoping for that opportunity to get utilized. We're humming right along here on the Ducks Just podcast, and we want to get into our last topic of the day, which is Carlos Lachlan and the Oregon running backs. We got to hear from Carlos Lachlan the first time that the reporters got to kind of meet him and talk with him since he took the job at Oregon, coming over from Western Kentucky. And we also got to talk to Byron Cardwell, who is as weird as it is to say, the most experienced back for Oregon, at least, taking carries at Oregon as a Duck. No, Whittington comes over from Western Kentucky, and the Ducks also have Sean Dollars. So before we talk about some of these guys, Dylan, I just got to say, I love talking to Carlos Lachlan. I posted that video the other day when he was talking about just how passionate he is about football. And then I think what's really struck a lot of fans, and definitely stuck with me, is just how he's trying to kind of have a nod to the history of Oregon football, and just, respect to the greats that have come before him, whether it be Gary Campbell or awesome running backs like D'Anthony Thomas, Michael James, Kenyon Barner. He talked about how those guys are the standard, and that's ultimately what he's holding himself to and what he's chasing.
Yeah, that was awesome to hear, just because, obviously I don't think the running back group has really taken a step down too far from that standard. CJ Verdell and Travis Dye, I think, did a really good job of holding that. Obviously, they're 2 of the 5 leading rushers in program history. But the fact that he's looking back on the alumni and seeing where the success is, because Gary Campbell was a coach for 30 plus years, I think, starting from the 80s to 2016, long time. He was the longest tenured, assistant coach in the FBS when he ended up leaving in 2016. So tons of experience. He's coached so many incredible players. There's nobody in this program that is better for Carlos Lachlan to learn from at his position now than Gary Campbell. And, now there's so much potential for guys like Byron Cardwell and Sean Dollars and Noah Whittington, especially with Whittington, having that experience with Lachlan, and Whittington can share that with Byron Cardwell and Sean Dollars, just what he called military style type of coaching is, where he said, I'm not going to use profanity at him, but I'll get into you a little bit. I loved everything that he said. His passion just burst through. That was the most evident passion that I've seen from a coaches. Not saying that any of them didn't have passion, because they all do in their own ways, but Carlos Lachlan, you could just see it in his eyes. That man loves what he does, and he loves his players, and he loves football, and it's so awesome that I feel like he's kind of the new Aaron Feld in terms of the energy. Like it seems like he's the guy that's going to keep that going a little bit.
He just has such a great story. I don't want to reiterate too much of it, but I didn't even know, and this is probably on me for not doing some more research on the guy, but that he had a background in law enforcement. He said that he was an undrafted free agent with the Giants, and then he got hurt, so he ended up playing some arena football. And then after that, he had various jobs, like he was a correctional officer, he was a police officer, and then he also said that he did some special detail work with the government. So like this guy just has a super diverse background. And then he was also talking about just the drive that he's carrying himself with, saying, quote, "I still work like I'm the guy who's showing up at Memphis every day, sleeping in my car, changing in the bathroom in hopes of just getting a locker and another shirt." So he's made it to, I don't want to say the pinnacle of the sport, because a lot of people view that as the NFL, and rightly so. But just because of the previous programs that he's worked at, Florida State was obviously a pretty historic one. For him to have the shot to coach these Oregon backs that are super talented, but largely unproven and oozing with potential, it really feels like he's the right guy to take this room a step forward, just because of the way he's mentioned that he's approaching it and the guys that he has to work with.
Well, he would definitely tell you that too, just because, I remember him saying that, every day I'm going to go into this job thinking that I'm the best developer of this job. And he's like, other guys will say it and I know they're wrong. I'm the best developer of it. And I'm not going to lie, when Oregon first hired him and I was looking at his resume, coming from Western Kentucky, such an air raid, pass heavy emphasis on the heavy offense. I was really interested in just what that was going to be like for him in that transition, just going from such a lopsided offensive scheme to something that's going to be more balanced, it sounds like, with Oregon. And I feel like the personnel is going to be just as good as he's had at Memphis. He's coached guys like Antonio Gibson, who's balling out with the Washington Commanders now. Got to watch myself. But he's done such a phenomenal job with recruiting. He's done a phenomenal job just getting the most out of his guys, particularly Sean Dollars. We talked about that a little bit on the site. I wrote about how he's starting to stand out, emerge in spring. Coaches won't tell you, this guy's standing out already. Like, we're only 9 practices in, but when you ask him about Sean Dollars and you ask Dan Lanning about Sean Dollars, everybody, there's a different energy around the player that he is. And I feel like that's credit to Carlos Lachlan and the energy that he's putting into these guys.
We've already talked a pretty heavy amount about Byron Cardwell. The last thing that I just wanted to say about him was that, just the physicality. Even though we were inside yesterday, I felt like our access was better just in terms of the proximity to the guys. And I heard firsthand, Lachlan getting into Cardwell and some of these other backs. So that kind of got me fired up. But I saw Cardwell just truck through a guy. So you love to see the physicality. But let's talk about Dollars a little bit in Whittington, because they're kind of the guys that we don't know as much about. I feel like Noah Whittington has a little bit of a slighter frame, but he's really well built. And I think that the way that he's getting described, very explosive, runs really hard, plays with a different type of effort. You can coach the details with a guy like him. That's what Dan Lanning was saying. Carlos Lachlan saying he's extremely talented. And then I saw him make a really nice cut yesterday to miss a defender. So I'm excited to see what Whittington can do, especially because he's a later addition. But the fact that he has that familiarity with Coach Lachlan, much like Christian Gonzalez has with Demetrius Martin, I think things like that kind of give me some confidence that this is going to be a smoother transition than you would maybe expect at other schools, because there's kind of some of these crossover guys, if you can call them that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Whittington was such an interesting addition for Oregon. I think we talked about it a little bit right before the spring and like around National Signing Day. Like, we thought Oregon really needed a veteran running back in that room. And Noah Whittington provides that. And yeah, you said he's a smaller frame, but you look at his numbers, they're not pedestrian by any means. And I did obviously say it's a pass heavy offense, but he averaged 6.1 yards a carry. He got 101 touches, 617 yards, 2 touchdowns. And yeah, he's got a good amount more than any other running back, at Oregon on the rest of the room. at Western Kentucky, obviously. Byron Cardwell's got the most out of any returner, but Sean Dollars is such an X factor, I think, because we've seen him in special teams. We've seen him kind of late in games early in his career. And then the Pac-12 championship, he comes in and it's like he's part of the rotation. I was at that game and I was like, whoa, where'd this come from? He had, I think, 8 carries and was running really hard. Looked like he hadn't missed a beat. And that's what Byron Cardwell just said on Tuesday, that you watch him out there, it looks like he didn't even hurt his knee, which is, when you look at a running back suffering a serious knee injury that held him out from, I think it was last spring, and we never saw him last year. And the fact that he's looking like nothing ever happened, that's a really good sign. And it seems like he's on a mission to, prove everybody wrong.
No doubt about it. It's you can see the excitement, why people have excitement about this running back room, despite all the youth. I think that Carlos Lachlan kind of summed it up. He was saying all 3 together will have something special with those 3. So, we're going to have our eye closed or have a close eye on those running backs and what Carlos Lachlan can do working with Kenny Dillingham and the rest of the Oregon offensive staff. A bit of a quicker episode today, Dylan, but I think we got some awesome stuff that we hit on. Got some injury updates, the quarterback battle, and some updates we got after talking to some people yesterday. But before we get out of here, Dylan, where you know how this goes, where can people find more of you?
You can follow me on Twitter at DRK Sports News. I have been getting a lot of new Oregon followers recently. So if anybody's coming from the podcast and following me and sharing my work, I really appreciate that. It's been popping off more than I can remember. So I love reaching out to the Oregon community and giving them the content that they want.
Right on. Make sure you guys tap in with Dylan. He's doing a lot of awesome stuff with us at Ducks Digest here on the podcast, as well as the transfer portal. If you guys want to find more of me, you can find me on Twitter at mtorresports. You can also follow the Ducks Dish podcast on Twitter at Ducks Dish. If you guys are looking for more Oregon Ducks content, make sure you head on over to ducksdigest.com. That's the Sports Illustrated site for all your Oregon Ducks coverage. And then you can also tap in with us on Ducks Digest forums, trying to build that lately. Sharing this on the screen here if you're watching us over on YouTube at Oregon Football Max Torres. Just trying to connect with you guys a little bit more, see what's on your mind as Oregon fans. I also put out a recent tweet lately asking for mailbag submissions for an upcoming episode of the Ducks Dish podcast. So I'll go ahead and retweet that again. But if you guys have questions, you can email them to me, ducksdishpodcast@gmail.com, or go ahead and reply and quote tweet that most recent tweet that I mentioned. But that's all we have for you guys on this episode of the Ducks Dish podcast. Thank you for tuning in and supporting wherever you're tuned in, and we will catch you guys in the next episode. Take care.